The afternoon light poured softly through the wide windows of the community center, warming the floors that had been cleaned so many times they carried a faint shine. People came here every day, children who needed a safe place after school, elderly folks looking for company, and volunteers who simply wanted to help. But on that particular day, something felt different. There was a sense of quiet expectation in the air. Even though no one quite understood why, the center's director whispered to one of the volunteers, "He's coming today. Try to keep everything calm." The volunteer nodded, though she was already trying to keep her hands from shaking. Important visitors came sometimes, but this man was not just important. He was the kind of person who appeared in news articles and business magazines, someone everyone claimed to admire, but few had ever met in person. The days after Adrian's first visit passed quietly, but something about that afternoon stayed with him in a way he couldn't ignore. He tried focusing on his usual routine meetings, calls, reports, deadlines, but his mind kept returning to the small figure at the art table. The girl who drew like the world spoke to her in lines and shadows. Lena had barely said more than a few sentences to him, yet her calm voice echoed in his mind. Whenever he paused long enough to feel anything, he found himself doing something unusual. He checked his calendar for free hours, something he rarely had. Normally, his days were filled down to the minute, sometimes down to the second. But that week, he canceled several appointments and quietly told his assistant he was adjusting priorities. She didn't question it. No one ever questioned him. But Adrian questioned himself. Why had he felt something so strong around a girl he barely knew? Why did it feel like she had gently reached into a part of him he hadn't acknowledged in years? He didn't have answers yet, but he knew he had to return to the community center. So, 3 days after their first meeting, he did. When he walked through the doors, a few volunteers gasped softly, surprised to see him again so soon. The director hurried toward him, caught between excitement and worry. "Welcome back," she said, trying not to sound too eager. "We didn't expect," he smiled. "I hope it's okay that I came by again, of course," she said quickly. "You're always welcome." He thanked her and stepped inside. Children were scattered across the room, some playing board games, some reading, others drawing or talking in small circles. The usual noise was there, but Adrian didn't hear much of it. His eyes moved across the room until he found her. Lena sat in the same corner, her sketchbook open again. The wheels of her chair were angled slightly, making it look like she had turned away from the rest of the room for a moment of peace. She didn't notice him yet. Her head was slightly bent, her hand moving steadily across the paper. He didn't want to startle her. So instead of walking straight over, he approached slowly and stopped a short distance away. "May I join you, Lena?" Looked up, her eyes surprised for a moment before recognition softened them. She nodded once. "You came back?" "Said I would," he replied gently. She studied him for a moment, then shifted her sketchbook so he could sit beside her. He settled into the same seat as before, feeling oddly relieved to be there. "What are you drawing today?" he asked. She turned the page slowly, revealing a sketch of a tree outside the window. The branches were thin and delicate, each line drawn with care. A small bird perched near the center, its wings half open, as if deciding whether to fly or rest. "It's beautiful," he said honestly. She shrugged lightly. "It's just a tree, but the way you draw it, it feels alive." A faint smile touched her lips, a tiny expression he might have missed if he weren't paying attention. "I like to make things feel real," she said. "Drawing makes things feel closer, like I can remember them forever." Adrian nodded. "I understand that." Lena tilted her head slightly. "Do you draw?" He laughed softly. "No, if I try, everything comes out looking like stick figures." She chuckled, a small, quiet sound he hadn't heard before. Everyone starts that way. Her gentle humor made him relax even more. They talked for a while about drawing, what she liked, what she didn't. She preferred pencils over paint because paint felt too loud. She liked shading, especially when she could sit alone and focus on tiny details. She didn't need anyone to tell her she was talented. She drew because it felt natural, like breathing. After a moment of silence, Adrian asked, "Do you ever draw people?" She hesitated. "Only when they're interesting," he grinned. "Was I interesting?" She nodded without looking up. "A little, He laughed again. I'll take it. The room around them buzzed with activity, but the space they shared felt quiet, almost separate from everything else. At some point, Adrian realized he'd been sitting there for almost an hour, simply listening to her talk in her slow thoughtful way. Then the director approached them, carrying a stack of papers. Adrian, when you have a moment, I'd love to show you our small library. We're hoping to expand it next year. He nodded, stood, and turned to Lena. I'll be right back. She didn't smile, but she gave a small nod. Okay. As he followed the director out of the room, he glanced back and noticed something. Lena was watching him leave. Not with fear or uncertainty, just curiosity. That, to him, felt like progress. They toured the library, the classrooms, the outdoor play area, and the small supply room that was always in need of donations. Adrian listened, asked thoughtful questions, and even took notes on his phone. But as much as he tried to focus, he kept thinking about Lena. Even when the director spoke about budget cuts and equipment upgrades, his mind drifted back to the quiet girl in the corner, who seemed to see life differently from everyone else. At one point, the director asked him gently, "You seem thoughtful today. Is everything okay?" He hesitated before answering. "Do you mind if I ask something personal?" "Of course," she said softly. "What is Lena's story? The parts you're allowed to share, I mean?" The director sighed quietly. "It's not easy. She's had a hard start." Adrian braced himself, listening. She lost her parents when she was around 8. It was sudden, and she had no other close family who could take her in. She was placed in foster care soon after. The family she's with now is kind, but they're struggling financially. They do their best, but medical needs can be overwhelming. Medical needs? Adrian repeated gently. Yes. She was injured as a small child. The damage affected her mobility permanently. She uses a wheelchair now. She attends physical therapy when the foster home can afford it. How often is that? It's not often enough, the director said quietly. Adrian's jaw tensed, though he forced himself to stay calm. Does anyone help the foster home? They get some support from government programs, she replied. But it's never enough. He nodded slowly, absorbing every word. It wasn't the pain in the story that struck him most. It was the quiet acceptance he had sensed in Lena. She wasn't angry at life. She wasn't bitter. She simply lived with what she had been given and found beauty in the small things. The director added, "She's very independent. Even when she needs help, she tries not to ask. She doesn't want to burden anyone." "That's the word," Adrian whispered. "What word?" "Burden." He took a slow breath. "No child should ever have to worry about that." The director's eyes softened. "You care about her." He didn't deny it. "I do," she smiled. "She needs people who see her the way you do." Adrian let those words settle into his mind. They stirred something deep inside him, something he hadn't expected to feel when he first visited the center. After the tour, he returned to the art room. Lena looked up immediately, her eyes following him as he approached. She didn't say anything, but she didn't need to. Her quiet gaze said enough. "Did you draw while I was gone?" he asked. She nodded. "I finished the tree. Can I see?" She opened her sketchbook to the page again. This time he noticed something new. The bird's wings were now fully open, as if it had decided to fly. Adrian smiled gently. "It looked lonely before," she said softly. "Does it still look lonely now?" She shook her head. "No, it looks like it has somewhere to go." Her words hit him in a way he didn't expect. He studied her quietly, wondering how someone so young could carry such deep understanding of the world. A few minutes passed before he asked a question that had been building in him since the first day. "Do you like the home you're staying in?" Lena shrugged in her careful, quiet way. "They're nice, but they're busy and tired." She paused. "People always think I need too much." Adrian's chest tightened again, out of shock, but out of sadness. "Do you think that?" "No," she said firmly. "I don't need too much. I just need someone who listens." He swallowed gently. "And do you feel listened to here?" She nodded. "Sometimes, but only by a few people." "I'm glad I'm one of them," he said softly. "Me too," she replied. They spoke for a long time about school, colors she liked to draw with, the funny noises the building made at night when she stayed late. He found himself smiling more than he had in months. Lena didn't try to impress him or treat him like someone important. She treated him like a person, and he appreciated that more than she knew. Eventually, volunteers began cleaning up. It was almost time for Lena to go home. Adrian watched as she carefully closed her sketchbook and placed her pencils in a small worn pouch. Everything she owned looked heavily used but well cared for. Her foster mother arrived again, greeting Adrian politely before gently touching Lena's shoulder. "Ready, dear?" Lena nodded. But before she turned away, she looked at Adrian and said, "Will you come again?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes, I will." She stared at him for a moment, searching his face for something. When she found whatever she needed to see, she gave a tiny nod and allowed her foster mother to guide her toward the door. As the wheelchair squeaked softly down the hallway, Adrian watched her go with a heaviness he couldn't fully explain. He felt something pulling inside him, again a quiet ache. A sense that this small girl had stepped into his life for a reason he hadn't figured out yet. After she left, he stayed in the quiet room for a moment, staring at the empty chair where she had been sitting. The faint smell of pencil shavings still lingered in the air and on the table. A few stray specks of graphite dotted the surface. He touched the table lightly, almost without thinking. He wasn't sure what to call the feeling inside him. It wasn't pity. It wasn't simple concern. It was something deeper, something protective. Something he hadn't felt since he was young, since before his life became filled with work and obligations and expectations. When he finally stepped out into the cool evening air, he took a deep breath, letting the quiet settle over him. He didn't know yet where this new path would lead. He didn't know that in a few weeks he would make a decision that would change everything. All he knew was that he wanted to understand Lena better. He wanted to be part of her small world, to bring light where she felt shadows, to listen when she felt unheard. As he drove away, one thought repeated again and again in his mind. She needed someone. And maybe, just maybe, he needed her too. His name was Adrian Cole. At only 28, he had become a billionaire through technology businesses he built from scratch. People often saw him as untouchable, someone who moved through life with ease and confidence. But those close to him said something different. He wasn't cold or distant. He was simply lonely in ways most people didn't imagine wealth could bring. That afternoon, Adrian's car pulled quietly into the small parking lot. It wasn't one of his expensive cars. He had purposely left those behind. Instead, he arrived in a simple dark vehicle, hoping not to draw too much attention. As he stepped out, dressed in a plain gray shirt and comfortable pants, the volunteers noticed how different he looked from the photos online. He seemed more relaxed, more human, like someone trying to blend in. Inside, the children were finishing their art session. Some painted wide landscapes, others scribbled shapes and colors with excitement. And then, near the far corner, where the room was calmest, sat a young girl in a wheelchair. She was small, with straight dark hair falling over her shoulders. And she had the kind of quiet presence that made people pause without knowing why. Her name was Lena. She wasn't painting like the others. Instead, she was drawing slowly with careful lines, as if every stroke mattered deeply. A sheet of cheap paper was tucked under her elbow to keep it from shifting, and her hands moved with a soft steadiness that didn't match her age. Even from a distance, anyone could see her drawing wasn't ordinary. It carried feeling shadows she had learned to create by studying the world around her, the way someone would who didn't have many other things to rely on. Adrian noticed her almost instantly, without even meaning to. He had come expecting chaos and noise, yet his attention went directly to the quietest person in the room. Something about her stillness reached him in a way he didn't expect. There was no sadness in her eyes, only a calm acceptance, as if she understood more than she ever said. The center's director approached him with a polite smile. "Thank you for visiting, sir." "We're honored." "Please don't call me sir," Adrian said with an easy smile. "Just Adrian is fine." He glanced around the large room. "I've wanted to see this place myself. Reports and photos don't show what it really feels like." The director nodded. "We're very grateful for your support. Your foundation has helped keep this place open." "I'm glad it's helping," Adrian replied. but I want to understand what else the children might need. As they walked through the room, Adrian greeted children, complimented their drawings, and asked simple questions that made them laugh. Many of them had never spoken to someone like him. Some stole glances, trying to understand how a billionaire could seem so normal. But even as he interacted, his eyes kept drifting back to the small figure in the corner. When he finally approached her, he slowed down, almost as if he didn't want to disturb the calm bubble she was in. Lena looked up briefly, her eyes gentle but guarded. She didn't speak. She didn't force a smile. She simply acknowledged his presence the way someone polite but shy might. "That's a beautiful drawing," Adrian said softly. She looked at her paper, then back at him and nodded once. "Thank you." Her voice was quiet, but it carried a steadiness that surprised him. "Do you draw a lot?" he asked, keeping his voice light and steady. "Only sometimes," she said. "It helps me think." "What are you drawing now?" She turned the paper slightly. It was a sketch of the room, the windows, the light coming in, the tables, the people, everything captured with surprising detail. The shadows were soft, the lines confident. Adrian blinked lightly. "You drew this without looking up much." She shrugged gently. "I look enough to remember. Then I draw." "You're very talented," he said. She looked at him directly then, her expression soft but honest. "Talent doesn't change anything." He paused, not expecting that kind of answer. Most children her age would have smiled shyly or joked, but her words carried a weight that hinted at something deeper. "What do you mean?" he asked gently. She turned her eyes back to the paper. "It doesn't fix things. It doesn't make life easier." Adrian felt something in his chest tighten slightly, but he didn't push her. Instead, he lowered himself to the bench beside her, sitting at her level. Most adults stood over her when they spoke. He didn't want to be one of those adults. The director watched from a distance, her expression softened. "She doesn't talk much," she whispered to a volunteer. "But look at her now." As Adrian sat beside Lena, children at other tables kept glancing over. Some whispered, but no one interrupted. "You come here every day?" he asked. "Most days," she replied. "School ends early for me because of the bus. I stay here until my foster home picks me up." He nodded, letting her speak at her own pace. "Do you like it here?" "Yes, it's quiet, and I like watching people." She looked toward the group of kids laughing loudly near the back. "Everyone is different, but they don't mind being here together. I like that." Adrian felt a slow smile come to his face. "I like that too." For a moment, neither of them said anything. The silence wasn't heavy. It felt comfortable, natural. Then he asked softly, "Does your wheelchair make it hard to move around the center?" She shook her head. "It's fine. Some places are tricky, but I manage." A small pause. Then she added, "I've had it for a long time. I'm used to it." Adrian looked at the wheels. They were worn and scratched. The seat cushion looked thin, far too thin for someone who used it every day. "Does it ever hurt to sit in it for long?" She hesitated. "Sometimes." He nodded gently, pretending not to be bothered, though his chest tightened again. Children should not have to manage pain on their own. He noticed she had drawn her wheelchair into her sketch. She hadn't erased it or hidden it. She simply included it the way someone includes a chair or table part of the scene. Nothing more. That told him a lot. A volunteer approached quietly, carrying a bowl of small snacks. "Lena, do you want one?" She shook her head politely. "You should eat something," the volunteer insisted gently. "You were too quiet during snack time." "I'm okay," Lena replied. Adrian waited until the volunteer left before saying softly, "Are you sure you're not hungry?" Lena shrugged. "I don't like eating when everyone is loud." He understood that feeling more than she guessed as they continued talking. Adrian learned that Lena liked drawing nature scenes, that she didn't watch much TV, and that she enjoyed listening to stories, even though she didn't talk a lot. She answered things honestly, but never gave more than she felt safe giving. He respected that after a while. The director returned. "Adrian, would you like to see the rest of the building?" He looked at Lena. "Do you want to keep drawing?" She nodded. "I'll come back," he told her. She nodded again, almost the exact same way as before. But this time, there was a tiny softness in her eyes, subtle but real. As Adrian walked away with the director, he kept glancing back at Lena. Something about her had pulled him in. It wasn't pity. It wasn't shock. It was something quieter, something familiar. "She's special," he murmured. The director nodded. "Yes, she is. What can you tell me about her?" he asked carefully, not wanting to pry but needing to understand. The director's smile faded into a sad, thoughtful expression. "Lena came to us 2 years ago. Her parents passed away in a factory accident. She didn't have other relatives who could take her. She's in a foster home now. Yes, a small one. They take care of her the best they can, but they struggle. Medical care is expensive, and she needs appointments regularly." "Does she talk about them?" Adrian asked. "She's grateful for them, but she knows they don't have much." The director lowered her voice. "She's been waiting for a permanent home, but people often choose younger children or kids without medical needs." Adrian's footsteps slowed. Something heavy settled inside him, not anger, but a deep awareness he couldn't shake. They continued walking through the center as the director explained programs, needs, and plans for the future. Adrian listened, asked questions, took notes in his phone. But no matter what they discussed, his mind kept drifting to the sketch on Lena's lap, the softness in her voice, and the calm strength she carried. After the tour, he returned to the art room. Lena looked up as soon as he approached. She didn't smile, not fully, but her eyes brightened just enough to show she was glad he came back. "Are you done working?" she asked. "Not yet," he replied with a gentle chuckle, "but I wanted to sit with you again." She moved her drawing slightly to give him room, a small but meaningful gesture. He sat beside her again, feeling the same quiet peace settle around them. "What are you drawing now?" he asked. She turned the paper. It was a sketch of him. He blinked. "That's me?" She nodded simply, as if it were obvious. He looked at the drawing. She had captured his posture, the softness around his eyes that most people didn't notice, and even the slightly uneven way he held his hands when he wasn't thinking. "It looks better than the real me," he joked. Lena shook her head. "No, it looks like how you looked at everyone. You look kind." That sentence hit him quietly but powerfully. People rarely told him he looked kind. They told him he looked intelligent, successful, intimidating, impressive but not kind. "Thank you, Lena," he said softly, meaning it more deeply than she could ever guess. She shrugged lightly, almost embarrassed by saying something that honest. The hours passed without either of them noticing. Children left one by one. Volunteers packed up materials. The director checked the rooms. Finally, Lena's foster mother arrived to pick her up. She was a tired woman with gentle eyes and worn hands. "Lena, time to go," she called softly. Lena put her pencils away, rolling her paper carefully so it wouldn't bend. She looked at Adrian one last time. "Will you come again?" "If you want me to," he replied. She nodded once. "I do." That was all he needed. He watched as her foster mother helped her toward the door. The wheelchair squeaked slightly as it moved. Without thinking, Adrian took a step forward and quietly said, "I'll see you soon, Lena." She didn't turn around immediately, but when she reached the door, she looked back for 1 second and gave the smallest, softest smile. It was a smile that carried trust, a fragile trust, but trust nonetheless. As Adrian walked out of the center later, the evening sky glowed orange. He got into his car slowly, his mind overflowing with thoughts he couldn't fully process yet. He wasn't sure why meeting Lena had affected him so deeply. He only knew one thing for certain. He had met many people in his life, but he had never met someone who made him feel the way she did, protective, grounded, and strangely hopeful. Driving away, he didn't know that one small meeting would change both of their lives forever. He didn't know that the quiet girl in the wheelchair would become the center of his thoughts, or that her simple words would soon lead him to make the biggest decision of his entire life. But that change had already begun. It began the moment he saw her drawing alone in the corner, and it was only the beginning of a story neither of them saw coming. The next week moved slowly for everyone at the community center, but for Adrian and Lena, it felt even slower. Something unspoken had taken shape between them after their second conversation. A quiet understanding neither of them had asked for, yet somehow both needed. Adrian found himself thinking about her during early morning meetings, and Lena found herself glancing at the doors every time someone walked in, wondering if it might be him. On Friday afternoon, the center was buzzing with its usual energy. Kids ran around after finishing their classes. A few volunteers were sorting donated clothes, and the smell of warm bread drifted from the kitchen, where an older man baked snacks for the children. Outside, clouds gathered overhead, but the lighting inside remained soft and warm. Lena sat near the window again, sketching. She had a habit of choosing the same seat, not because she couldn't move anywhere else, but because she liked the light there. Even though she couldn't walk, she loved the feeling of watching people come and go. It made her feel like she was part of a world that kept moving, even when her body DN'd single quotes. She was drawing a scene from memory, a small park she used to visit when she was much younger. Her pencil moved slowly, as if each line carried a memory she wasn't quite sure she wanted to revisit. She shaded the bench first, then the tree, then the outline of a girl who looked a little like her. But she stopped before finishing the girl's face. Something about drawing faces always made her pause. It felt too personal, too revealing. That was when she heard footsteps behind her. She didn't turn right away. A few kids passed by first, giggling about something silly. Then someone cleared his throat. It was soft, almost hesitant. "Is the seat next to you taken?" Lena looked up and saw Adrian standing there. He wasn't dressed like a billionaire today. Just a simple sweater and jeans, as if he were trying to blend into the background. But to her, he still stood out, maybe because she was starting to recognize the look in his eyes. That gentle curiosity, that way he leaned forward ever so slightly when he spoke, as if genuinely interested in her answer. "No," she said, moving her notebook slightly. "You can sit." He eased into the chair, careful not to bump her wheelchair. "You always sit in this spot?" She nodded. "It's bright here, and quiet. I can see why you like it." She didn't respond right away. She simply returned her eyes to the drawing, hoping he wouldn't ask too much about it. But he didn't. Instead, he just sat there, silent, giving her space to breathe. After a few moments, she said, "I didn't think you'd come back today." He smiled faintly. "I didn't think I would either. But I kept finding myself thinking about this place, about the kids." "About one kid in particular," he replied softly. She knew he meant her, but she didn't know how to respond. So she simply lowered her eyes and turned her pencil slightly, shading the curve of the tree branch again. He watched her hand move with a calm patience. "You draw beautifully," he said. "Every line looks like it means something." She shrugged. "Drawing is easier than talking sometimes. That's how coding was for me when I was younger." His voice held a quiet nostalgia. "I didn't have many friends. Computers were easier. They didn't judge, and they didn't expect anything from me." "Wait." She glanced at him. "You didn't have friends?" He shook his head. "Not really. I moved a lot. My parents were always working, always traveling. I stayed with relatives most of the time. I learned not to get attached." "That sounds lonely." "It was," he admitted. "I guess that's why I notice people who are quiet. They remind me of what it feels like to grow up inside your own head." She let out a small breath. "I'm not quiet because I want to be. I know." His voice softened even further. "You're quiet because life made you that way." Her hand froze. She didn't know how he knew that, but he was right in a way that made her chest tighten. A volunteer passed by, smiling politely before disappearing into the supply room. The noise around them faded again, leaving them in a small pocket of calm. "What are you drawing?" he asked after a moment. "A memory," she said. "Good or bad?" "Both." He waited, not pushing her. That patience was something she noticed about him quickly. Most adults rushed, tried to fill silence, tried to fix what wasn't theirs to fix. But he just... waited. "It's a park," she finally said. I used to go there with my mom when I was little, before everything changed. Are you comfortable talking about what happened? She shrugged lightly. It's not a secret. I got sick when I was 9. It was sudden. One morning I could walk, and a few months later I couldn't anymore. He swallowed hard. That must have been terrifying. It was confusing. At first I kept thinking I'd wake up one day and everything would be normal again, but that day never came. Her voice didn't break, but something inside it trembled. What about your mother? He asked gently. Lena looked out the window. She passed away a year after I got sick. Adrian's breath caught. I'm so sorry. So am I, she said quietly. She was the only person who made everything feel okay. Your father? I never met him. A long silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable, just heavy with the things neither of them knew how to put into words. That must have been so hard, Adrian said softly. Losing so much at once? Lena nodded. She had talked about her past before. But something about telling him made her feel exposed, as if she had opened a door she rarely touched. He leaned forward slightly. Who takes care of you now? I live with my aunt, she said. She works a lot, and she's tired most of the time. But she tries. She really does. He listened intently, his eyes softening with every sentence she spoke. In the community center? He asked. It's my safe place, she replied. They let me draw here. They treat me like I belong. People don't stare as much. She didn't have to say the rest. People stared in other places. They whispered. They judged. How long have you been coming here? He asked. 3 years? And how long have you been drawing? Since I was small, my mom taught me. She used to say that drawing helps people see the world the way your heart sees it. It's beautiful, he murmured. Lena gave a shy smile. She said a lot of beautiful things. Adrian watched the unfinished face on her page. Do you draw yourself often? Not really. Why not? She hesitated. Not because she didn't know the answer, but because saying it out loud made it feel heavier. I don't always like the way I look, she admitted. Not just the wheelchair. Sometimes my clothes don't fit right. Sometimes I feel small. And sometimes I think people look at me and see someone broken. Adrian's jaw tightened gently, as if her words struck something deep inside him. Lena, he said softly, I want you to hear something. Really hear it? She looked at him. You're not broken, he said. Not even a little. You're stronger than anyone sitting in this room. What you've survived, most people wouldn't know how to handle, and you still show up. You still smile. You still draw. That's not broken. That's brave. Lena blinked, caught off guard. She wasn't used to people speaking to her like that. Most adults either pitied her or ignored her. But Adrian didn't either. He saw her, and that felt strange and warm at the same time. Thank you, she whispered. He nodded. I mean it. The room became louder for a moment as a group of kids started a game of tag. Adrian glanced around, as if trying to understand how this place held so many stories at once, some loud, some quiet, some hidden beneath small smiles and worn-out backpacks. Lena put her pencil down and rubbed her wrist. Her hand had gotten tired. You okay? He asked. Yeah. Just need a break. Without thinking too much, he gently turned her notebook toward him. Can I look? She hesitated, then nodded. He studied the drawing slowly, tracing each line with his eyes. You have real talent, he said at last. Not just skill heart. There's feeling in everything you draw. She flushed slightly. I'm not that good. You are. She looked at him skeptically. You're just being nice. No, he said. Being nice would mean I'm saying it to make you feel better. I'm saying it because it's true. Lena fidgeted with the corner of her paper. Compliments were hard for her. She was used to encouragement, but not genuine admiration. Adrian placed the notebook gently back where it was. If you ever want to learn more, or try better materials, I'd love to help you. She blinked. Why? The question caught him off guard. What do you mean? Why would someone like you help someone like me? Her voice wasn't bitter. It was honest, innocent in a painful way. He leaned back in his chair and looked at her with a seriousness she didn't expect. Because I care. She stared at him. You barely know me, she whispered. Sometimes you meet someone, he said slowly, and they touch something inside you that you forgot was there. She swallowed. Lena, he continued gently, every time I talk to you I feel something I haven't felt in a long time. It's like you remind me of who I was before everything in my life became complicated. She looked confused. And you remind me, he added, that kindness doesn't have to be earned. Lena felt her throat tighten. She wasn't used to being spoken to with such raw honesty. Before she could answer, a volunteer called her name. Lena, snack time. You coming? She nodded faintly toward the volunteer, then turned back to Adrian. I should go, she said. Of course, began to wheel herself away, but something made her stop and look back. Will you be here next week? She asked quietly. He smiled in a way she hadn't seen before, soft, hopeful, almost relieved. Yes, he said. I will. Lena nodded once, then turned again toward the kitchen. Adrian watched her go, feeling something inside him shift something. He wasn't ready to name but couldn't deny anymore. He sat alone at the table for a few minutes. Staring at the drawing she had left behind, the girl on the page had no face, no expression, nothing to tell the world what she carried inside, and somehow, he understood why Lena didn't draw faces, because she wasn't sure anyone truly saw hers, as he stood up and prepared to leave. One thought settled in his mind with unexpected clarity. He wanted to be someone who saw her, not out of pity, not out of guilt, but because she deserved to be seen, and because, somehow, seeing her made him feel seen too. He walked toward the doors with a steadiness that surprised him. Something had changed that day, something he couldn't undo even if he tried. Next week couldn't come soon enough. Part 4 will be written here in simple, natural English. The next morning arrived quietly. The kind of soft morning where the light outside the window looked gentle, as if it didn't want to disturb anyone. He stood in the hallway of the care home, holding 2 cups of warm tea. He had brought one for himself and one for the girl. He didn't even drink tea usually, but he had noticed yesterday that she did. It was a small detail, but for some reason, it had stayed with him. When he stepped into her room, she looked up with sleepy eyes. She wasn't sad like the previous days, but she wasn't exactly cheerful either. Her wheelchair sat beside her bed, and a blanket was wrapped around her legs. You're early, she said in a soft voice. I brought tea, he replied. Lifting the cup a little, she hesitated, then gave a tiny smile. Thank you. He placed the cup on the small table beside her, then sat down in the chair near her bed. She watched him for a few seconds, as though she was trying to understand him again, trying to make sense of someone like him showing up day after day. She took a sip from the cup and held it gently with both hands. You don't have to come every morning, she said. I want to, she asked, tilting her head. You're a busy person, a really busy person. He didn't know how to explain the strange pull he felt whenever he thought about her. It wasn't pity. It wasn't guilt. It was something else, something he didn't even fully understand. I just like being here, he said simply. Talking to you feels real. Her eyes softened, and she nodded slowly. Most people never talk to me like that. He raised his eyebrows. Like what? Like I'm a normal girl, she answered, looking down at her blanket. People either act too soft around me or avoid me. You don't do either. For a moment, the room felt heavier, but not in a sad way. It felt heavier because the truth had been spoken out loud. He leaned back slightly in the chair. You are normal, he said. You re-smart, funny, stubborn, and you keep roasting me every time I say something dumb. She let out a small laugh, her first genuine one that morning. He liked that sound more than he expected. After a moment, she placed the cup down. Can we go outside today? She asked. Of course. Anywhere you want. She paused. Just outside the building. I like the garden. He nodded. Then that's where we'll go. He helped her into her wheelchair gently, making sure her blanket was secure. She didn't mind being helped by him. Usually she tried to do things alone. But today she allowed it without argument. They rolled through the quiet hallway, passing a few nurses who smiled at the pair. When they reached the garden, he pushed her slowly along the path. The morning air had a fresh scent, and birds were chirping somewhere above them. She looked up at the sky. "I used to love mornings like this," she said. "Before everything changed." He didn't press. He waited. She finally continued. "I wasn't always in a wheelchair. It happened after an accident. After that, everything became harder. I lost friends. I lost school. I lost a lot." He walked beside her instead of behind her now, pushing the wheelchair with one hand so he could see her face. She didn't look sad. She looked tired. "What about your parents?" he asked softly. "They're gone," she said, her voice small. "Both of them." He felt something deep in his chest shift. He had guessed she had no family, but hearing it in her own words made the reality sharper. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. She nodded. "People always say that." "I guess they have to," shook his head. "I'm not saying it because I have to." She looked at him, studying him carefully again, maybe searching for the truth in his eyes. After a moment, she turned her attention to a small patch of flowers. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if they were still here. Would my life be different? Would I still be the same?" "I don't think losing them changed who you are," he said. "It only changed what happened around you." She blinked hard, then looked away. She wasn't crying, but she was close. "Do you ever miss anything?" she asked suddenly. He took a slow breath. "Yes, like what?" He looked at the sky, too. "I miss having someone to talk to without thinking about business or money. Someone who isn't afraid to tell me the truth." She glanced up at him. "You have people around you all the time. Being surrounded doesn't mean you're not alone," he replied. She looked down at her hands and whispered, "Yeah, I know that feeling." They continued through the garden quietly. Neither of them felt the need to fill the silence. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was peaceful. They reached a wooden bench. He gently parked her wheelchair beside it and sat down. For a moment, they just watched the leaves move with the light breeze. After a while, she spoke again. "Do you really want to adopt me?" The question made his chest tighten. He had wondered when she would ask directly. "I do," he said honestly. "I meant it." "Why?" she asked again. But this time her voice was different, not confused, not doubtful. "Just curious because you deserve someone in your life who's there for you. And I want to be that person." She didn't respond right away. She just stared at her hands, thinking. Finally, she said softly, "I'm not easy to take care of." "I don't need easy," he replied. "I just need you to let me try." She swallowed hard, and he could see her lips tremble slightly. But she didn't cry. Instead, she looked straight at him and asked, "What if I'm not enough?" He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. His voice was calm, steady, and sincere. "You are already more than enough." The wind moved through the leaves again, filling the silence between them. She looked down and her voice came out in a whisper. "No one's ever said that to me before." He nodded softly. "Then I'll say it again and again until you believe it." She bit her lip, trying to steady her emotions. After a long moment, she said, "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not," he replied immediately. "But you aren't." His voice was firm this time, not loud but determined. She looked at him again, and for the first time, he saw hope in her eyes instead of fear or doubt. They stayed in the garden for almost an hour. She talked about little things, stories from when she was younger. Her favorite books, the way she used to paint before the accident. He listened closely, never interrupting, never judging. At one point she asked, "Do rich people ever get scared?" "All the time," he said. "Of what?" "Losing things that matter," she nodded, understanding when they finally went back inside. A nurse approached and handed the girl a small envelope. "This came for you," the nurse said, smiling. The girl opened it slowly. Inside was a postcard with a picture of a sunrise over mountains. On the back, someone had written a short message. She read it quietly, then tucked it away. "From a friend?" he asked. She shook her head. Just someone I used to know. He didn't pry, but he noticed the way she held the postcard a little too long before placing it in her drawer. Later that afternoon, he helped her sit near the window. Sunlight fell across her lap, and she watched the world outside with a soft expression. You know, she said after a while, you don't act like a billionaire. What does that mean? He asked. You act normal, he laughed. I'll take that as a compliment. It is, she said. He smiled at her, and she smiled back. Just a little, as the day slowly shifted into late afternoon, she began to grow quieter. She looked thoughtful, almost nervous. Finally, she said, I want to tell you something. He turned his full attention to her. Anything. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. If you really adopt me, I want you to know I won't always be happy. I won't always be strong. Some days I'll be scared. Some days I'll be frustrated. And some days I might push you away without meaning to. He listened closely. So if you want to change your mind, she continued quietly, you still can. He shook his head slowly. I'm not going anywhere. But I'm not leaving, he repeated. She took a deep breath. Why are you like this? He smiled. Maybe because someone should be? For a long time she didn't speak. She just looked at him with a strange expression, as if she was seeing him in a different way now. You're going to make me cry, she whispered. He spoke gently. Then cry. It's okay. She shook her head stubbornly. No, I don't like crying, chuckled softly. Most people don't. Silence returned, but it was warm again, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in soft orange. She finally whispered something so quietly he almost didn't hear it, I think. I'm starting to trust you. He felt his chest tighten, but in a good way. That means a lot, he said. She looked out the window again. Maybe tomorrow, she said slowly. We can talk about what adoption really means. He nodded gently. Anything you want. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the fading sunlight rest on her face, and for the first time since he met her, she looked peaceful. The day ended quietly, but a shift had happened, small, fragile, but real. And even though she didn't say the words out loud, he could tell she was beginning to imagine a life where she wasn't alone, and that was more than he could have hoped for. The next week arrived faster than anyone expected. But for Adrian and Lena, it still felt like a long wait. Both of them carried the same quiet hope inside their hearts, though neither had said it out loud. The community center had become their shared meeting place, almost like a small world where time slowed down enough for them to breathe. On Monday afternoon, clouds gathered in the sky, hinting at rain. The center was calmer than usual. A few kids were decorating paper lanterns for an upcoming festival, and soft music played from a speaker in the corner. The volunteers seemed relaxed, chatting in low voices while sorting out supplies. Lena arrived earlier than she normally did. She had asked her aunt to drop her off as soon as possible, and her aunt agreed with a tired smile. Even she could tell that something was different about her niece lately. Something lighter. Something hopeful. Lena sat in her usual spot near the window, her sketchbook open on the table. Today, though, she wasn't drawing anything. Her pencil rested in her hand, unmoving, as she kept glancing at the entrance every few minutes. She tried to look casual, but her heart knew better. She didn't know why she felt nervous. Maybe because she had opened up more than she planned to. Maybe because she was scared he wouldn't come. Maybe because deep down, she had started to trust him. And trust was something she didn't give easily. As minutes passed, she let out a small sigh and turned her notebook toward herself. She allowed her pencil to touch the page, trying to distract her mind with soft lines and simple shapes. She was still sketching when she heard gentle footsteps approach. They weren't rushed or loud. They were familiar. Hi, a warm voice said. She looked up and there he was, Adrian, standing a few steps away with a soft smile that melted her nervousness instantly. You're early, he said, sliding into the chair beside her. So are you, she replied with a tiny smile. He laughed quietly. Maybe we both had the same idea? She nodded, feeling her chest relax. Something about him always made her feel like it was safe to breathe. For a moment, they sat in comfortable silence. Adrian took in the room, the children's laughter, the warm lights, the smell of freshly baked cookies coming from the kitchen. He had been to many places, fancy hotels, private offices, luxurious gatherings, but none of them carried the same gentle warmth this place carried. "How have you been?" he asked softly. "Good," she said. "Just tired sometimes." "But good? And your drawings?" She showed him the page she had been working on. It was a sketch of the community center, drawn from her point of view at the window. The lines were soft and delicate, yet full of life. "This is beautiful," he said. "You captured the whole room." "It's not finished," she murmured. "It doesn't have to be finished to be beautiful." She lowered her eyes shyly, and he watched her with a warmth he didn't bother hiding. After a moment, she looked up again. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything. Why do you always come here? You have so much work." "You're, busy." Adrian paused. It wasn't that he didn't know the answer, but saying it out loud made it feel real. "I come here," he said slowly, "because this place makes me feel human. And you remind me of something I didn't know I had lost." She tilted her head slightly. "What did you lose?" "Myself," he whispered. "Somewhere along the years I became someone people expected me to be. Someone strong, in control, successful, but not someone who understood what it meant to feel connected to others." She listened quietly, "And when I talk to you, it feels like I'm becoming myself again." Lena held her breath. She didn't know how to interpret his words, but she felt something warm in her chest, a tiny spark of belonging she hadn't felt in years. She looked at him with gentle eyes. "I'm glad you're here," he smiled. "Me too." As they sat together, another volunteer approached their table. "We're starting the little art display today," she said cheerfully. "We're hanging some of the kids' drawings on the hallway wall so visitors can enjoy them. Lena, are you joining?" Lena blinked. "Display." The volunteer nodded. "Yes, the kids' artwork. We do it once every few months. You should put up something too. Your drawings are always so beautiful." Lena hesitated. "I don't know." The volunteer smiled encouragingly. "Think about it. We'd love for you to join." When she walked away, Lena stared at the page in front of her. Adrian watched her expression shift from confusion to worry. "You don't want to participate?" he asked gently. "I'm not sure," she said. "What if people think it's not good? What if they don't understand it?" He shook his head. "Art doesn't need everyone to understand it. It just needs you to feel proud of it." She fidgeted. "I don't think I'm good enough." "But I do," he said softly. "And I wish you could see what I see." She didn't answer, but the thought lingered. A few kids ran past them, laughing loudly. The room brightened with the kind of simple joy only children can create. Adrian leaned back in his chair, studying Lena with quiet admiration. "Do you want to take a walk?" he asked gently. She glanced at her wheelchair, then at him. "A walk?" "Well," he corrected himself with a warm smile, "a roll. I can push the chair if you want. We can go outside if it's not raining yet." She hesitated. She wasn't used to letting people push her wheelchair. It made her feel dependent, and she hated that feeling. But something in his eyes told her he wasn't offering out of pity. "Okay," she said softly. He stood up and moved behind her chair, his hands gentle on the handles. "Comfortable?" "Yes." He pushed her slowly toward the door, making sure not to go too fast. They stepped outside into the open courtyard. The air was cool, carrying the smell of rain, but not the rain itself yet. The sky was silver with clouds. A soft wind brushed against their skin. "It's nice out here," she said. "It really is." They moved quietly along the little garden path. Kids had planted flowers there weeks before, and though some were small and uneven, they added a soft color to the space.